Q&A section, right, Jean?
Right.
Yeah. So the presentations will be recorded. However, the Q&A will not be recorded. So that way you can ask whatever question you want to, pretty much, without feeling silly. So I hope everybody enjoys this, and I thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to pass it to Ibrahim, who is going to talk about some of the prejudices that we experience living on the margin.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to first start off with a prayer. And this is called the Prayer of Opening. I bring myself to the door of God, in the name of God, closer to me than all my relatives, creator of relationships and the one who nurtures them best. My devotion and my praises flow to God, the guide and nourisher of the soul and conscience of every being, the one Lord, dearer to me than myself, the one to whom I belong, the source of my life, the ground of my being, and the origin of my identity. I sing the name of my Lord, I sing the name of my King, King of my heart, owner of my soul, judge of my intentions, the truth of my interactions, and the sincerity of my engagement with him. My Lord and nourisher of my soul, here I am in your court, honored by this private audience with you. I stand before your majesty. I beseech you on my behalf and on behalf of all creation, echoing the eternal voice of all conscious beings, those who came before me, those who are living with me, and those who will come after me, I say, our journeying is to you, and in you we find our strength, assistance, and support. You light the way and you give the will. You are the end and you are the means. Guide us to your straight path. Lead us in your good way, the way of eternal bliss walked by your beloved ones. Those who awaken to become witnesses to your abundant grace, who appreciate and fully experience your blessings. I seek refuge in you, in your eternal grace and everlasting light, my Lord and teacher of my soul, from being of those who are blind to your beauty and goodness, who stay deaf to your call of love, those who consume, dishonor, devalue, or take your gifts for granted. I seek refuge in your eternal grace and everlasting light, my Lord and teacher of my soul, from being of those whose resistance had made them experience divine gifts as deprivation, for whom blessings become barriers, and opportunities for guidance and closeness to you become the very cause of their severance. I knock at your door, my Lord. I am at your threshold. Do not let me turn away. May this door never become an obstacle. Open my being to you and open the way for me. Amen. It's as a Muslim, it's very important to start any gathering with the remembrance of God. And Islam teaches that when we remember God, then God is in turn remembering us. So if you ever question, or if you ever want to know how frequently God is remembering you, you just have to ask yourself, how frequently are you remembering God? So God wants to have a relationship with us, and He's opened the door for us, and it's up to us to walk through that door and take part in that relationship. I don't have a lot of time, and there's a lot of things that I would like to talk about. I am very excited to be part of this talk. So I'll just go ahead and get into it right away. Now, as a Muslim, in Islam, there is a big emphasis on the importance of witnessing something or experiencing something. And once you experience it, once you've gone through a specific experience, there's a certain door that's been opened to you that may not have been open to you previously. And to give you an example of what I mean, our scholars give the example of tasting honey. So if you imagine tasting honey, if you want to describe how honey can taste to someone who's never tasted it, you can use different adjectives, but you'll never know how sweet honey really tastes until you actually taste it yourself. And my journey in Islam, really goes back to that concept of taste. God has blessed me to experience the taste of living life with Him. And as I talk, I'll point out some of these different examples of this blessing that God has given me to actually witness Him in my life. Now, I want to point out that my dad is here with me, and I'm very happy to see him, and he is going to be a big part of what I talk about today. And I do want to say thank you to my parents, because they played a big part in raising me, and I thank them. And it was because of them that I am in the place that I am today. Now, my parents, they now the topic of this talk, from what I understand, is what you can do as a Muslim living in a country where Muslims are not exactly the majority. And my parents really took the position of not letting the aspect of them being a minority to overpower them, or to make them feel like they couldn't do anything positive in this country that they raised their children in. Now, they are both doctorates of education, and they could easily gotten jobs at universities that would have paid them, a very good salary, but they chose to do something. They chose to do something else that they felt was important. When they had us, they wanted to give us an education, and they realized that there wasn't any Islamic schools in their area. So they were the founders of the Islamic school movement in America, and my father, he was a principal for 31 years. He's since retired, but within that span of 31 years, him and my mother have been very instrumental in establishing Islamic education in America. Now, my parents, the way that they raised me, and the way that they raised my five brothers, really showed us how to embody the faith. For instance, my father, whenever he would interact with the students, he would always kneel down to their level. So, for instance, if he's talking to a 4-year-old or a second grader or a kindergartner, he wouldn't stand over them and speak to them, but he would actually kneel down and speak to them. And there were many students in the school, and he would always address them by their names. And constantly you would see him picking up trash or doing these other things where he didn't expect other people to do the job for him. Like, he really showed he really practiced what he preached, and he was very humble in that as well. Now, Cameron, he introduce the talk by saying that I would talk about, some of the prejudices that I have experienced being a Muslim. And to be honest with you, I haven't experienced very much at all, and I'm very blessed that I can say that. And I think the important thing that I've always that I've always lived by is to not view myself as a victim or view myself as a minority, but to take active part in the society. And again, going back to my parents and how they started the Islamic education, there wasn't any Islamic school to speak of. So instead of, settling for public school, they strived to provide something beneficial to the American society by, establishing Islamic schools and creating people who raising the students who would come into that school as God-fearing and as productive citizens of this country and of this world. Now, just to talk about myself a little bit, and my life as a Muslim in this country. Now, my parents, they raised us, and they raised their 6 sons to be Muslims, and they did so in a way where they didn't just teach us Islam, but they showed us how to be good Muslims. And going back to the example that I gave with my father, picking up trash, and my father really engaging with the children, this is the teaching that Islam promotes. To never feel like you're too big, your role is too big to do even the simplest of tasks, or to the importance of connecting with people. So I was very blessed that I had, parents who not only taught me Islam, but also showed me how to be a good Muslim through their actions. And another way that they would kind of help instill the message of Islam in us is that, they were both, my dad was a teacher and my mom my dad was a principal and my mom was a teacher. So they had summer vacation off, just as we did. So we would all take road trips during summer, and they would take us to different landmarks throughout the country. We went to Mount Rushmore, we went to the Grand Canyon, we went to the Badlands, and they really took advantage of these summer vacations to really help us appreciate this creation that God has given us. And God in the Quran, a lot of examples he'll give to us to show his majesty and his greatness is through the creation that he's created. And if you look at, like, for instance, one is the moon, and he'll ask you to just reflect on the majesty and the beauty of the moon. And if you just contemplate the beauty of the Grand Canyon, it's difficult to not imagine that God, who's built such a great thing as that, so it really helps to build a relationship with God in that way. Now, at a certain age in my life, I had to ask myself if I was going to be a Muslim because I was raised a Muslim, or if I'm going to take on this religion for myself. Now, after high school, we're all encouraged to go to college and what have you. And I tried to go to college. And this is one thing that living in this country does make it difficult, because if you do want to go to college, the options to you as far as the financial path are pretty limited. You either have to take out a student loan or try to get your grades high enough to get a scholarship. Now, as a Muslim, we don't delve with interest whatsoever. So taking out any student loans was kind of off the table for me. So what I would do in order to practice my faith within the society that like schooling, student loans were kind of the door that you had to walk through. I would take a semester of school, and then I would work for a year to pay that semester off. And unfortunately, school is so expensive where it did take me a year to pay everything off. I did that for a couple years, and as you can imagine, I didn't get very far with my education because of how long it took for me to get just to pay off my schooling. So I asked myself, I said, what am I really doing? I was going to school to get a communications degree, and I asked myself, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? Is this really what I want to be doing? So I came back, through reflection, I realized that if I'm going to be a Muslim, I have to really understand what that truly means. And in the Quran, it says that, or it teaches that those who completely put their trust in God and who are aware of God, God describes them by being those people who will have no fear and no grief. And as we know, this life can be very difficult, and especially with COVID, there are a lot of people who are dealing with there's a lot of difficulty that comes with dealing with COVID. So I wanted to kind of see, okay, so if I associate myself with God, and if I live a life that's if I live a life where I'm connected to God, will I really have that? Will I really have that tranquility in my heart where I don't feel any grief or any sadness? So I decided that I would go on the spiritual journey in search of God, and so I prayed and I asked God to show me where I should go on the spiritual journey of mine, and I ended up going to Morocco. And in Morocco, I had a lot of very positive experiences. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to go through what I wanted to speak about. Now, with my time that I spent in Morocco, there was I'll finish this. I'll finish with this then. There were two difficulties in my life where, if I didn't have that promise of God saying that if you turn to me, then I will give you that tranquility. So I spent some time in Morocco, and I was really able to kind of attach myself to God and live a God-fearing life. And while I was in Morocco and traveling in Spain, My mother, she was diagnosed with leukemia, and while I was in Morocco, I got an email from my brother saying that she was in her last moments of life. She had gone to the hospital, and the doctor was telling her that she didn't have much time to live. So I tried to rush back to America to catch her in her last moments. So I was in the Madrid airport, coming back to America, and I went to go look for the prayer area in the airport, and I just kind of prayed and asked God to make it possible for me to be with my mother before she passed. And while I was praying, I got a phone call from my sister-in-law, and she told me that my mother had passed before I was able to see her. So I left the prayer area in the Madrid airport, and I was just kind of wandering around through the airport. And I was thinking to myself, there's no reason for me to live right now. I just felt completely devastated. But then I was reminded by a verse from the Quran that says that after difficulty, there will be ease. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of hope that, okay, I mean, I am going through a difficult moment. And so if I could just be a little bit patient, there will be a time of ease that God has promised me. And it was shortly after my mom's passing that I met my wife, Sabrina, and the only thing I can say about Sabrina is that she was that fulfillment of that promise of God, because she's very supportive of me. She's a wonderful wife, and she's a wonderful mother. And I get along very well with her parents, and her side of the family gets along very well with my side of the family. So any of the common family feuds that may happen between in-laws, are not present in my life. So I'm very grateful for that. And then lastly, a few years after my mother passed away, my brother, who lived in Kentucky, he was delivering pizza, and while he was delivering pizza one night, someone attacked him and killed him, and we got the news of his death, very early in the morning. And I was in Wisconsin at the time, and then my father was in St. Louis, so we all rushed to Kentucky to be with my brother, and to attend the funeral. And now you can obviously imagine that this is a very difficult time for us, as was the time when we lost our mother. But I want to really go back to what sparked my journey in the first place. If you turn to God, and if you really try to live a life where God is a center point of your life, then there will be there's a tranquility that God really places in your heart, and God really guides you to the best route that you should take to handle the difficulties that are thrown at you. And I've given you the example of how God inspired me to handle the death of my mother, and in doing so, the blessings that can come through handling the difficulties of life in a certain way. So with the death of my brother, God inspired us to handle the situation in a way that would provide us healing and growth that we can only attribute to a hand of God playing a role in it. So they eventually ended up finding the killer of my brother, and they asked us to come to the court where we could, speak about my brother Salahuddin, and so leading up to that court visit, my father, he sat us all down. He sat all of our children. He sat all of us down, and he said, when we go to this courtroom today, I'm going to forgive this person that killed your brother. And in Islam, it does give you the option of retribution, so an eye for an eye. But God says that the highest thing to do is actually to forgive, and that's the route that my dad took. So when we entered the courtroom that day, my dad addressed the killer of my brother, and he essentially said, I forgive you, and I'm not angry at you. And by doing so, it not only helped us to move on, so we didn't have any animosity or anger towards this person, but it also brought the family of my brother's killer closer to us. So we were able to establish a special bond between all of us. So I just wanted to kind of share my life experience, and I thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, for sharing tonight, presenting tonight. That was really powerful, and I would just like to thank you again. And I imagine that everybody here really appreciated your speaking tonight. So from here, it's time for my father, Samir, to speak, and he is going to be talking about, he's going to go for it.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? You guys see me? Awesome. All right. Thanks for having me. It is actually a great pleasure to be sharing some of the experiences with you guys. Okay. I'm a glass half full type of guy. Okay. I don't let negativity kind of bring me down, so I never focus on those things. So I'm going to share the positive aspects. Okay, so first I'm going to share with you guys, I have a famous poet that I usually read a lot and try to understand the message that he tries to convey. He's a Pakistani poet. I have been reading him since I was a kid. So I try to translate his poetry, just a simple poem that he has written, and it will tell you who I am and what I'm about and what I'm going to share with you guys. Okay? So his name is Iqbal, by the way. And he says, create the ability to look beyond where your journey ends. Create the ability to look beyond where your journey ends. If you find the river, then seek the ocean. Every glass shatters with the throw of a stone. Find a glass that shatters the stone. Your world has changed your prayers. Find a prayer that changes the world. So that's who I am, that's what I'm about. So let's talk about,
I want to see the chat.
a little bit about my journey. I moved to the U.S. a few years back, 97 to be precise, and I wasn't 18 at that time. My son gave me too much credit. I was a little older than that. Okay. My experience in the U.S. has been fantastic. Okay. Nothing short of a miracle. I'm not naive. Okay. I know that there are different views that do exist, prejudice, they do exist. I do know that. But I also know that in America, I also became a better Muslim. In America, I also became a better human being. Okay? In America, I also became a better version of myself, I should say. Okay? And the reason for that was, it was because the people that I was working with. I started my life in this country, North Carolina. A lot of people think of North Carolina as, a place where I think the KKK kind of started there, I believe, maybe, or they had a huge holding there. But I tell you what, I was working in a small town, and those people were so wonderful. They helped me in every single way. So I'll share a simple story. This was the first experience that I had as a Muslim in this country, in that small town in North Carolina. So this place where I was working, in second shift, they had a large population of Pakistanis working in this factory. And a lot of time, they would go out and pray. And one day, I mean, most of them they did not speak very well. English wasn't their first language, so hard time communicating. So one day the supervisor came to me and said, "Hey, I see several of these guys. They go and outside, and I see them, doing a lot of exercise." He didn't know that they were actually praying, so he thought that was some sort of a special exercise that they were doing. And he said, "What are they doing?" So I told him, I said, "They're actually praying." And this is the first experience I want to share with you guys. So this guy tells me, he's like, "Why are they going outside to pray? Okay? You have this huge office. Why don't you tell them to come in and pray in your office?" I'm the Muslim guy with the giant office. I didn't think of that. This guy in North Carolina, middle of nowhere, he's the one who said, "Why aren't you telling them to come in and actually pray in your office?" That was my first experience as a Muslim in this country. Okay? And it continued on, all the different things that have happened. It continued on, always those types of experiences. So I tell you what, for me, it has always been focus on the positive and ignore the negative, because negativity will never change anything. Negativity will not do anything for you. Okay, so that's how my father raised me. That's what he taught me. Focus on what you can do. Don't worry about the others. Okay. Now the other thing that I share with you is, I have been blessed. I do a lot of work with a lot of different companies at all levels of the companies. And one thing that I share with you, that what has made me successful was because of my background. Because I was thinking about situations differently. Nowhere has me being a Muslim and Islam has helped me in the business world. Because one of the things that I have learned being a Muslim is that you always tell the truth. You always stand for what's right. You always help others. Okay? Try to make them better, make them successful. So when you have that type of training, when you have that type of mindset to begin with that your religion has taught you, and then when I took those practices, when I took those same principles and start applying them to work, all of a sudden, it was a lot easier to gain others' respect. It was a lot easier to, get them on my side. So it was not so much that here's this outsider, it was more of, hey, this guy, he's just like us. He holds the same values. He, practice the same principles. So the more they learn, the better they were towards me, for me. Okay. Now, the last thing that I'll share with you is leveraging the strengths, right? We can always focus on, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different. I look at it is, because what everybody values is your unique perspective. So my focus has always been in how can I make my unique perspective a strength for others, okay? How can I make my unique perspective a strength for a business? How can I make my unique perspective strength for my teams, for my community? Okay. So the way I look at it is I can go down the negative path where I can keep saying that, hey, these people are treating me differently because I'm different, or I can go down the path of how do I leverage my unique way of thinking, my unique way of looking at different situations and offer up different solutions. Because end of the day, believe it or not, it doesn't matter what religion you believe in, doesn't matter what color of your skin is, all of those things, they are secondary. Primary thing is we're all human beings. I value that part first, that I have to connect with someone at a human level first, then I can talk about everything else. And I think that is the piece that helps a lot when you focus on, let's connect at a human level first. Then I can share with you what my background is, what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, how can we coexist successfully, peacefully, and be good for each other. I don't know what else you guys want me to share with you. I can write that the speech. All right, with that, I'll end it. Camera on yours.
Good job. Oh, come on. All right, so can you guys see my screen again? Yeah? I'll take that as a yes. All right, so right here, there we go. All right, so now that we've heard wonderful talks from both Ibrahim and Asad, it's time to get on to the what we can do as individuals and maybe how you can work with the people around you to create a better situation, whether it's trying to share the views that people like all of us may feel, or whether it's trying to better understand the views for yourself. So first we got, if you are an educator and if you have somebody who you are teaching something to, not only as a student, but maybe a child or a grandchild, anything of that sort, it's very important to look at the article that I put up there to maybe understand how to better interact with those who may not be exactly like you, and to maybe understand a bit of where they are coming from. Second, I wanted to further demonstrate the amount of heritage that Islam does have in this country, and that in reality, we're not that separate as some people may paint it. So that second article discusses the history that Islam has in the United States, which isn't often taught to us. Third was to research the topic of intersectionality. I've got a good article on there about it, It's really interesting. It talks about how, in reality, a lot of our struggles that we do face and a lot of our ways to move forward go hand in hand. You know, the person next to you who you might on the surface believe is having a completely different experience than you is often seeing the same thing as you, where, you know, they might be annoyed about something going on in traffic. They might be annoyed about the way their boss was talking to them, something like that. And I also have for number 4, read the article that's there as well, which talks more about how you can show your support for the Muslim American community when there are sometimes situations where we really need that sort of rallying power to make sure that we continue to have the same existence that the rest of you do. And lastly, I have to host a book club, which is really a polite way of saying that you guys need to get together and read these people. It's essentially signing homework without assigning homework. But what I'm saying is that I would recommend reading books from different Muslim American authors who sort of do a better job of demonstrating the way to not only empower yourself from a position as a minority, but empower yourself as just a citizen in the United States and just as a citizen in general. Some authors I recommend are Malcolm X, Kwame Ture, and Edward Said. Now, after this, we got the youth focus, and I don't know if Aaron wants to talk about this or not. That is up to her.
You can keep going if you'd like to, Cameron, or I can walk through them. Either way would be fine.
I'm gonna have you do it because I don't know as much about it.
Okay. Well, as you know, we've been including youth materials in our programs, both because many of us work with youth in our professional lives and others have youth that we engage with, you know, in our personal spheres of influence. So these are very similar to action steps we have seen before. Cameron was even just speaking about the first one for some of his adult resources. So just looking at your library of marginalized stories, there's more out there every day. And they, both in fiction and nonfiction, provide that view that is, you know, outside the norm, perhaps in this country, but definitely maybe isn't somewhere else, right? You know, there's also, I think as Cameron has been showing with some of his references for adults, many educational websites or podcasts that you can be listening to. These are not specific to the Islamic experience. They're simply different opportunities to take on a view different from your own. Next slide, Amy. And a big one that we've heard a lot of tonight is just that self-reflection piece, right? So engaging youth, you know, about their own stories or the family stories, who's there, who's not, the different identities people may or may not even recognize that they're holding, the ones that they hold to the tightest. I think we've heard that in both of our speakers tonight, and also what we're doing to make sure that we're not only being welcoming, but actually engaging with the individuals that are around us. So, and I know that Cameron has enjoyed being a part of DAT because of that action piece, which is why for his program in particular, I added that last sentence. So I think we can move to the next slide, Amy.
All right, so now that we did that, so now we have the next steps and announcements. I'm gonna do these, and then after I talk on these, we'll have time for question and answer. So, as said before, the recording of this program will be posted on the Hedberg Public Library YouTube channel. And you can check the Diversity Action Team website or partner Facebook pages for upcoming events and the registration for those events, something that we've had to do now with COVID-19 and doing everything on Zoom. And we also have some future events of interest with Courageous Conversations, which will be discussing the Everyday Racism video produced by Community Action on December 28th, 2020, and the Injustice Anywhere is a Threat to Justice Everywhere event airing Saturday, January 16th at 12 p.m. on the YWCA Rock County's Facebook page. And with that, I would like to thank everybody for attending. And now it is time for the question and answer. So I'll stop sharing the screen.